Everyone, here we are at the 6th annual Anti-Prohibition rally in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. All right! I've been asked once again this year to speak by the organizers to all of you on behalf of L.E.A.P, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, a U.S.-based organization of retired and present-day corrections officers, probation officers, DEA agents, judges, and Border Patrol guards, to name but a few, who all believe that the war on drugs is not working and that there are certainly other answers out there. Anyway, again, I wear another hat as well, you guys. I'm one of Canada's first 20 legally, federally licensed cannabis patients for the indications of chronic progressive MS, and a violent pain in my face 24 hours a day called tic-dollaroo. I've spoken publicly about legalizing and regulating all drugs for almost 20 years and will not stop until this is resolved. I have been legally licensed to use cannabis as medicine for almost a decade, and I'm 45 years old. I know I will see an end to this war before I'm done if it's the last thing that I do. Many of you do not know that before I became a corrections officer, I taught guitar for a few years. That's where I first met... That's where I first met troubled young people. Their parents were trying everything to keep some of them out of trouble, and the young offender jail system wasn't certainly not the way to go. So it piqued my interest in working more with young people and telling them about the drug laws and how confusing they were. So there I ended up moving on to corrections. My job in corrections involved locking people up for almost a decade and escorting the prisoners back and forth to court, getting ready for trial, etc., for various offenses, including but not specifically limited to drugs and drug-related activity. 10,000 police officers, correction officers, prosecutors, FBI, DEA agents, and judges through a group called Law Enforcement Against Prohibition again have joined the call for legalization. From our perspective in the trenches, we're not only losing the fight, we're hurting our prospective countries. Leave spokespeople know drug war statistics. We help generate them. Over $1 trillion spent. Another $69 billion consumed each year. Prohibition continues. 37 million arrests for nonviolent possession. 1.9 million more arrests every year in the U.S. with 4.6% of the population. And today America has 22.5% of the world's prisoners. The first inmate of Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary in 1829 was an 18-year-old young black American. There have been a long legacy of higher rates of incarceration for black Americans. There began a longer legacy of higher rates of incarceration for black Americans. In 1989, the number of black prisoners surpassed the number of whites. By 2003, some 832,400 black Americans were in the nation's prison and jail systems, compared to 665,100 whites and 363,900 Hispanics. Though blacks were always overrepresented in prisons, the differences from white population rates increased dramatically in the 1990s. The incarceration rate for black rose 63% during that decade. In contrast, the white rate rose 36% and the Hispanic rate rose 35%. Increases for the period were due large partly to the war on drugs proclaimed in the mid-1980s. Millions of dollars are spent on enforcing nonviolent drug offenses, while if we were really thinking we could utilize those monies to a greater expense, fighting much more violent and hideous problems such as rapes, robberies, and thefts involving aggression and harm to others. Remember, America has 4.6% of the world population and 22.5% of the world's prisoners to date. In 2003, 4,834 out of every 100,000 black males were sentenced to prison, compared to 681 per every 100,000 white males and 1,778 per 100,000 Hispanic black males in the U.S. Though the rate of black males going to prison was high, the fastest rising segment of prison population by the late 20th century was minority females. This, the young women of our world need to be aware of. As our population ages, so do the penalties increase for unlawful behavior. For example, a young woman may get sentenced to 3 months in open custody as a young offender facility for trafficking drugs, while an older person would be looking at around 6 months in jail to start at a full custody facility. Mandatory minimums are doing horrible things to the United States of America. Why, in God's name, would we want to go there? By focusing on illegal drugs and those who use them, we are targeting the marginalized. Law enforcement should be arresting rapists and murderers and the like for harming people in our society. Because the government wastes time and money and prisons are overflowing with detainees, those in charge are releasing child molesters, robbers, and other violent offenders in order to fit non-violent drug offenders in. Something is seriously wrong with this picture when they are releasing child molesters, rapists, and robbers earlier than their sentence allows, due to mandatory minimums, all assisting to the aid of increasing the costs of welfare recipients, the need for more services to aid the people whose family member is incarcerated, and rehabilitation programs involved. In Mexico, drug violence claimed 6,290 people last year, double the previous year, and more than 1,000 in the first 8 weeks of 2009. This fighting over drugs and who is in control has got to stop. The violence keeps increasing and there is no end in sight. If only we could do what L.E.A.P suggests and have the government officials regulate and tax and control all drugs in Mexico and all over the world. Please do your part to help us end the war on drugs today by writing to your members of parliament and explaining to them the devastating effects that the war on drugs is having on you and your loved ones. Speak out and say what is on your mind. Maybe, just maybe, you will be the reason the drug war ends. Thank you.